Welcoming you to our panel, Starting Out and Starting Up Ecosystem 101 with Aisha, Dani, Ivan, Tandyo, Cristabel, Gekas, and Alex Power. A powerhouse lineup presented today here as part of the Future Founders Festival 2021 in partnership with Study Melbourne and StartSpace, powered by State Library Victoria. First, we'd like to acknowledge all Aboriginal clans of Victoria and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. We here at State Library would also like to acknowledge and pay respects to Indigenous people all around the world. Before we begin, just want to run through some housekeeping information for you out there. To participate in the audience Q&A for this session, use the Ask a Question box in Slido. And this is where you can ask questions for the festival presenters. We'll get through to as many as we can at the end of the session. To interact with one another and make and have any comments, please use the join the conversation chat box. And you can also react to the event with the emoji bar along the bottom of the live stream panel, and also use our festival hashtag FFP21 to share with us what you're viewing, how you're feeling, and what you're enjoying in the festival. Just also flagging, there's on the Joma Blue platform, there's also a networking feature. So if you path out through the lobby, there's also networking pieces. So make sure, look through the other participants and make sure you also accept any networking requests that might come your way. But thanks for joining us. Just throwing over to our panel to just quickly introduce themselves as we get started. Over to you, Aisha.
Hi, Anne. Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here today. This is totally right up my alley. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm a co-founder of Sistervate, an incubator for Muslim women founders. We started Sistervate to bridge that gap in the ecosystem and make sure that Muslim women have representation. I also wear another hat. I'm a program manager of entrepreneurship at the two tech schools of Melbourne Polytechnic, where I develop, teach and coordinate basically the high school program for entrepreneurship. Very much what this audience will be looking for today.
Thanks, Aisha. Over to you, Ivan.
Hey guys, it's really great to see you all and be part of this. Thank you, State Library and StartSpace. And my name is Ivan Tandyo. I'm the CEO and the founder of Navanti Holdings and 11Space. So Navanti is an investment company. So we've been investing into diversified investments for the last 15 years. So we got portfolios from different industries, got more than 20 companies that we have now, and mainly from property industry, manufacturing, trading, technology, creatives, and services. And we also have an initiative called what we call 11Space, which is our incubator, our very own incubator, because we are so passionate about entrepreneurships and passionate about business itself. And we believe in a small beginning, and we provide a space just like a business farm, just to help to provide an ecosystem for startups to grow and for our businesses to grow with us, to be in partnership with us, and we help you to reach your dream and your purpose. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Ivan. Over to you, Cristabel.
Hi everyone, thanks Anne. I'm so glad to be here. My name is Krista. I currently run the Startmate Fellowship for Women, which is a 2-month program helping talented and ambitious women pivot into startup roles. So I work with women from a diverse range of backgrounds, lawyers, consultants, healthcare professionals. We had a costume designer apply last year. So I have the awesome role of working with who want to break into the ecosystem. They come to Startmate in Australia and New Zealand. So we bring together the best founders, investors, and operators to grow the economic development created by startups in ANZ. And our ultimate mission is to 10x New Zealand.
Great, thanks, Krista. And finally, over to Alex.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. My name's Alex. I come from a little country in northern South America called Guyana. I came here for university about 10 years ago. Came to Ballarat, of all places, and I completely love it. And I'm currently the founder of Delivr, which is a full service food delivery platform. We compete with like Uber Eats and the menu logs and whatnot. This is the latest. I've been doing this for about 4 years of like a string of startups that I've done. If you were to ask me to describe myself, I'd probably say I'm the biggest loser I know. But as long as your wins outshadow your losses, well, then you just keep going, right? Just keep showing up every day. But yeah, that's kind of the sum of my story.
And that is our lineup for today. So let's get stuck into the moderated panel. So let's start off with the first question is, what kind of person would you feel makes a successful entrepreneur or a startup founder? Who would like to have a go at that first? Unmuted there, Aisha. Go on.
I have unmuted. Thank you, Anne. I think one of the key things that keeps coming out in literature, in whoever writes about this topic in all the spaces, I think the mindset is really, really important. So you've got mindset and you've got skills, but something that's really, really important is to be very flexible, not to be rigid in your thinking, and to have a lot of resilience and agility, and to be able just to keep learning. And I think that's the other key part of it, is to be a continuous learner, to approach entrepreneurship as if you're a curious child and not have a lot of preconceived notions about what the outcome will be. You're on the journey. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from this whole space, is just to maintain utmost curiosity and just go with it. That's what I would say.
Alex?
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. If there was one word to sum it up, it'd be resilient. It doesn't really, I now lead a tech company with no tech background, right? You shouldn't ever let that be a limit. You could always figure it out. Once you surround yourself and, you show the curiosity and always willing to learn and grow, you could just keep going.
And Krista, you would have seen dozens and dozens and hundreds of applicants and people coming through the funnel. What are your thoughts about any measures of success in terms of the individual themselves?
I love this question. I think, echoing Aisha's comments, it does come down to creativity, curiosity, and resilience. But I think that the core qualities of the sort of women that come through the Startmate Fellowship, I think they're hungry for more. I think they see work as something more than a 9 to 5. I think they have a real sense of purpose. And I think, they want to have an impact. They're hungry, they're curious, they want to get out there and they want to have a legacy, And I think more and more people these days are sort of getting to certain points in their careers when they've realized, oh, maybe I've gone with the flow for too long. Am I really living my life's purpose and mission? So I think someone who's in tune with that voice and has a deep sense of knowledge of self, I would say, which sounds a bit woo-woo, but I actually think it takes a lot of courage to say, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to pursue the crazy ideas and, I'm going to go against the expectations of my parents, of my peers, maybe even of myself, and I'm going to, solve real problems. Yeah.
And I think that's a changing narrative. It's like, traditionally it was get into university, do the course, be the profession X, whereas now that's becoming very different. Ivan, investor hat on, running communities. You might have met very diverse founders as well. Anything that jumps out to you?
Yeah, throughout our journey, we've met a lot of founders coming from different spectrums. And a lot of people ask me, like, what's the don't become like kind of founders that you don't like? Well, I think I completely agree with the rest of my friends here. Number one, I think as a founder, you have to have a visions, and you can only have a good visions when you have that curiosity. You have to be creative and curious at the same time. And I think you would want to see that your visions, you can tell us a lot from someone's visions, whether the visions will be a very selfish vision or something that can impact the community or impact a lot of people. And you want to see that, a vision that's beyond money. That's what we want to see that now. And number two, I think being teachable is so important. That's one of the completely don'ts, that we don't invest. No matter how good your business idea, we won't invest in someone who's not teachable, who doesn't want to evolve, doesn't want to change. Because a lot of people say change is the only constant. But then how would you change if you don't want to be changed, if you don't want to learn about new things, if you don't want to admit, if you're not humble enough thinking that I'm nothing, I just want to learn something new. I want to keep learning, right, from someone else. lastly is the energy. I think energy is so important, and to be continuously perseverance and just relentless, heads on your passions. And I think passion play a huge role in that as well.
Thanks to the panel. There's just so much there about introspection, trying to figure out who you are, and then applying that into an idea or area that you can see impact in. Coming closer to home, international student audience, alumni, and also people dialing in from all over the world. But here in Victoria, so Future Founders is brought to you by State Library Victoria and Study Melbourne. Why Victoria? Why Melbourne? We've got a few individuals here from Melbourne, and Alex Powell flying the regional Victorian flag, dialing in from Ballarat. What makes Victoria like a good place to get started in terms of the world, in terms of the ecosystem? Any thoughts about that piece?
Who wants to go first?
How about yourself?
Yeah. I've been selling Melbourne all my life.
Tell us about that, Ivan. How would you sell Melbourne?
Simply, seriously, we're like the most livable city in the whole world, right? We all agree, right? And we've been like, who else in the world has been like 8 times in a row, most livable cities? And I think not just that, I think the whole ecosystems, I think we've done well, guys. I think we all done well. We try to create something for the community in terms of, well, I believe my dream really relate to the dreams of all my friends here, that we really want to see people grow and find their dream, reach their dream. And by having like StartSpace, and then SLV starts, and then you also Startmate, and then 11 Space, everybody might look coming from a different angle, but everybody wants the same goal. We want to help out. We want to reach out. We want to see we strive. We want to be, we want to see. I truly believe never neglect the small potentials, and from something that is really raw. I've seen it all my life too. I was an international student myself and a migrant. I start everything from zero. I knew how hard was it, and I think it's a good initiative that all of us come together and acknowledging that challenge and wanting to reach out to help. And audience, have a look. There's so many helps around you.
Does anyone have any thoughts around resources or communities or things here in the ecosystem that have been invaluable in your journeys?
So to add to that, right? So we all know that Melbourne is the most livable city, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's so diverse and it's so multicultural. And I don't know about the rest of the members here or the people watching, but where I come from, and I've seen trying to do businesses in lots of other countries. I come from a long line of entrepreneurial people, and it is so incredibly hard, even in 2021, in Guyana, where I come from, or the Caribbean, where a lot of my family live, to do any sort of business. And then when I come to Australia, when I talk about how easy it is because the infrastructure is so well developed, and then you team that with the fact that Melbourne and Victoria as a whole is such an open and accepting area, it's kind of it's a recipe for success. All you have to do is kind of have the idea and show up and keep showing up. But the banking is incredible. The internet is, some people will tell you NBN's not any good, but let me tell you what's worse, internet back home. The resources and the infrastructure here really set everybody up for huge success if you just keep showing up and you do it.
And not to use a cliche here, but the people in Melbourne. So I myself am actually quite new to startups. So I've only been in the ecosystem for about 6 months. And I think the generosity and I think the willingness to collaborate has been really heartwarming. And it's good for people, it's good for business, but especially if you're a newcomer, I think there are a lot of people who are willing to help, willing to share, especially if you're a young person who's maybe looking to break into startups. I think there's so many opportunities in early stage companies, for example, to take you on as a generalist intern. I think there's a real buzz and excitement despite some of the challenges we've faced with COVID. And it's a small ecosystem. So get out there, get to know people, share your story and your journey, and see what resonates with other people.
Well, if I continue on from what everyone has said, I think over the last 6 years, or it's been 6 years now, the government in Victoria actually invested in the ecosystem. I'm not sure if all of you remember back in 2015, but there was a concerted effort, and I think we're seeing the fruits of that. We're seeing the fruits of the ecosystem really maturing, going past that, initial pain point of not having the pre-accelerators around the place. So it's actually filtered out, which is so fantastic to see. So we've got pre-accelerators. Basically, if you've got an idea and they're free, they're actually in community spaces often. So they've reached out into the regions, they've reached out into the sort of the inner outer Melbourne parts. And they cover so many different things, not only vertically, but we also got it horizontally, but also vertically. I mean, our initiative, Cristabel, actually is a testament to that. So you can find your space depending on where you are on your journey and what you're particularly looking for. So if you're interested in sports, there are pre-accelerators, accelerators that look at that. If you're a high school student, I mean, we've got our tech schools who actually encourage entrepreneurship, and they're maker centers where you can actually go out there and test your ideas. But the universities are fantastic. The majority of them have some sort of a startup space, whether it's a pre-accelerator one or an accelerator one where you've developed your idea further. So it's a testament to this. I mean, I think it's a story of Melbourne particularly because we really do think things through and then we execute quite well. The city is so fantastic to live in. As everyone has said, the infrastructure just works. So you have all those barriers that, from all of the quarters throughout our community, we try to remove those barriers. And I think that's a success of Melbourne and of Victoria in particular. So, come and live here.
That's not just Melbourne, obviously, regional Victoria as well. Big shout out to the team at Runway who do amazing work in the regional entrepreneurial space. Yeah,
shout out to visit Ballarat. I think we just won top tourist town in Victoria. So
and the balance between work and good coffee, right?
The coffee should draw you to Melbourne.
Many a startup is built on caffeine power, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Also,
yes.
Hello to all our tea drinkers out there today. But I guess there's that. It's predicated on the idea that people from diverse backgrounds may have additional barriers to starting up something. And there's amazing work across the community with different communities. So One Roof working with female founders, work with Usman and Catalyzer working with new migrants, refugee founders, asylum seekers. It's really very much honing in on community and opening up that channel and pipeline into the rest of the ecosystem. Here's an interesting one for the panel. What questions should someone ask themselves before starting out a startup? Any thoughts?
Are you ready for this? It's probably the first one, because it's not going to be easy.
Then why do it, Alex?
Well, why not do it? The alternative is to never try and build your dreams. What's the point of spending half your life sleeping if you're not going to try and actively build the things you're dreaming about?
Yeah. And what's your risk profile? What's the worst hardship that you're willing to put up with? How far are you willing to take this idea or this company? Would you do it for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? How dedicated are you going to be to your idea and your problem? Because chances are, like everyone's already pointed out, you're going to have to chop and change, and there's going to be challenges along the way. And from my perspective, because I run a program for women who are looking to find a job in a startup rather than start their own company, would you be happy to, help someone else, help a founder build their own idea? Would you want to join a company instead? Because that's completely viable as well. And, you can still be involved in startups and be a part of the carnival in another way, in another form.
I think for my perspective in this is that you can think about it quite a lot, but the most important part of it is just to go out there and just do it. Just to go and find the space that you will be comfortable in, because we've got so many options, as I mentioned earlier, and really just roll up your sleeves and just get started, because you don't know whether that idea will actually succeed or not. And until you take it out of your mind, out of your psyche, out into the real world where it actually touches the first customer, that's when you'll know whether your startup is actually going to be something that's going to have longevity, or whether it's going to be, it's an idea that you need to kill, and you need to kill it pretty quickly. so that you can move on to the next brilliant idea, and then you can potentially, you know, have that success that you're looking for, whether it's a, you know, whether it's a sort of a niche business, a micro business, or whether it is a full-fledged startup in the tech space, you know, that will become a unicorn, or you're going to solve some tremendous, you know, environmental problem in the world. So there's so many flavors to it. But the most important one is that nothing will happen until you roll up your sleeves and just get out there and just engage and work on your idea.
Ivan?
I think the one question that every founders need to ask before they start is, what's the purpose? What's the purpose you're doing what you're doing, or doing what you're about to do? I think, to me, I'm a big believer that that every design, any business model, any business idea is a byproduct of a purpose. So purpose always comes before the design. Every single thing that you have, your phone, they gotta be, the founder need to come up with that dream of a purpose of that item. What do you want to try to do with it? And then the design comes after that. And it's so important for them to really think, what do you want, the why behind the business? Why do you want to do this? And why do you want to do that particular business model? What kind of issues do you want to solve? What kind of pain and all that you're trying to solve in the market? I think purpose, think about why do you want to do it?
Great, thanks, Ivan. And for anyone out there that is on that kitchen bench thinking about an idea and wanting to make a start, that's fundamentally why we created StartSpace at the State Library of Victoria. It's for free, it's for everyone, and it's a space and a service to take that first step to really test out your idea. So if you're interested, feel free to reach out and then find out more about what we're doing here as we host events like this. So say you started, it's gaining some traction. What's the next step? Just speaking to the panel, what are the next steps in terms of scaling up? That conversation around investment, bootstrapping, who would like to dip their toe in, and where that side of the journey could head?
I think any advice I give will be very one-sided, because I've kind of fallen in love with the process of bootstrapping, you know, kind of making it work and trying to generate revenue in any hustling way I can. And then, all right, cool, this one's turning over this much. Well, that buys me a runway on that one, and then I'll do this and just keep going. I have no clue how to start raising money. So maybe Ivan is probably the best one to answer.
But before we go to Ivan, potentially, Alex, I love a story you tell about how Delivr started.
Right.
So getting your first customers. I'd love you to be able to tell our audience that story.
Yeah, so when we first started 4 years ago, it was off the back of another startup I had run into the ground. And we were like, okay, so we want to do food delivery in Ballarat. We're in this specific space where there was no food logistics. Like, all right, well, I'm just a kid with a laptop. There's a couple of us. Restaurants aren't going to trust us with their food because we have no credibility and we don't really have any money. We don't have anything else. So the first version was built on Wix, which is a drag and drop, you know, do anything you can to survive sort of thing. Costs us $20 a month. And then, so that was one answer solved. But the next one was, how do we get restaurants? So without permission, we put McDonald's and Hungry Jack's on. We just copied their menus, threw them up there. And then we put it up onto Facebook, into the groups, into all the community groups we could, and they started going a little viral. And then a couple days later, we did KFC, and that went huge. We got like 50,000 shares or impressions, and it was like, whatever it was incredible. And from there, we started gaining credibility because we're those kids doing, you know, 30 grand worth of KFC a month sort of thing, right? And then, you know, then we started building actual partnerships as we gained credibility. We developed out some apps. We found a really great software as a service platform. KFC, McDonald's sent us cease and desist orders. That was great. The KFC one's on my wall. It's 13 pages. It's excellent. It's very thorough. And, you know, from there, we grew from, again, a couple of kids who weren't really following the rules, but to, you know, a couple $1 million a year now. So it's do what you know, be unapologetic, but also don't break the law. Like if they tell you to stop, probably stop. But be unapologetic with your idea and just keep going.
So that's one path where it's very much grind, bootstrap.
Yeah.
Anyone thoughts on other potential routes to scale?
I actually agree with Alex. No kidding. And I believe Okay, let me start with this. I believe that everybody deserves a chance to be successful in entrepreneurships, not only subject to capital. I think creativity is more worthy than what we call a worthy assets to have more than your capital. I do a talk in Indonesia. In Indonesia, sometimes the demographic of the people, they're below the poverty line. A lot of them say, business is only for the rich. And I disagree with that completely, because throughout my journey, I failed many businesses in the past. And the businesses that I succeed most, one of them businesses that I succeed most requires the least capital. Can you imagine? And coming back to Alex's point, I think it's so important for a founder to get their skin in the game before even getting funded. Because I think it's so important for them to be accountable with the little things. And this is especially being a new founder. It's so important for them, even if we invest in people now, we don't straight away give them that chunk of money, but we want to see, let's try with 20,000, 50,000, see how can they be accountable with it? Because without grinding and the hustling that Alex mentioned, I don't think people understand how to appreciate every single dollar. If you said straight away on day one, get $1 million, get ready to lose it. I think it's so important, but you need funding to scale. One is you have a track record. Alex, I think you're next to be funded. Once you have the track record, you're ready for it. I think that's where people start investing. That's why a lot of VC and all my friends VC, they look at Series A and Series B, that's their sweet spot.
Yeah.
I want to take a different approach. I think surround yourself with a community of other founders and get some great mentors as well, and I think you can't underestimate the importance of not going at it alone. I think we've spoken about the grind, but yeah, when times get tough or when times are great, who are you going to share those moments with? Who are you going to go for advice? For example, before you take investment, or deciding whether you want to take investment or not, how are you going to get help? And so it's great that we have communities like StartSpace, and some amazing resources within Melbourne and Victoria more generally, LaunchVic, StartupVic, Startmate, SisterVate, or everyone's here. Just everyone sort of provides that community, and I'd plug into that that part of an ecosystem to find mentors and friends.
Any thoughts?
I'd just like to add, I think all of them are on point, and I totally share their idea about, so we have founders who approach us and ask for investment from us. So one of the things that we look at is, has the idea been validated? How much of that work has actually taken place, and how much capacity and skill set does the team or the founder have, because you're investing in them at the end of the day. So we find that, there's a lot of ambitious goals, but the actual traction in terms of validating the idea and understanding, where they are in that journey and how much they have actually got quantifiable proof that there is demand for that idea. I think that is improving. But, in the early days, it was just an idea, a landing page, and it's you give me money. Whereas now I think it's a lot, there's a lot more work and a lot more effort that's been taken place, but there's still gaps, we find there's still gaps. So I would say definitely get some quantifiable data, evidence to prove that, your idea actually, there are people out there that want it and they're willing to pay a particular price for that. The other part that I would say, once you've gone past that stage, so bootstrapping, there's so many services, so many free, advice. So seeking out people who've been in the journey beforehand, shortcuts, because everyone's, tested things and they know what works, what doesn't work. So seek out those, those people in the space that you want to work in and get some advice from them, so that you don't spend, half a year testing out the various platforms and someone can give you the shortcut, as an example. So definitely there's, as Chris said earlier, around accessing those existing startup spaces. One thing I would say, that when you're ready to scale up, just as a founder or in the startup, have a look at your operations. There's probably a lot of inefficiencies. There's sometimes that Wizard of Oz type of effect taking place where the outside looks perfect, it's all automated, but the back end people are frantically trying to make, and there's just, you know, the amount of time it takes, you know, the supply chain, it could be, you know, the priorities, how automated your back end is. So the more efficient your back end is, and it, you know, reflects what's been presented to the audience or the customer base, the more real that is, the more scalable you become, the quicker that process can take place. So I would recommend that for those that are ready, that's one area that I would probably focus on. And I'm sure that there's plenty of spaces where they can get some really great advice about which parts to prioritize.
Yeah, and there's so many amazing like back-end systems, SaaS systems that can plug in now and help journey you through that scale versus suddenly hit a mark and then realize you've got to start from scratch again and transfer everything and try to plug it all back together. Just to the audience, start sending through questions. So we're nearly up time for audience Q&A. Just two more from me. To the panel, what's the best piece of advice that's been given to you thus far about startup life?
I'll tell you guys a story. So 2 weeks into my job at Startmate, so it's my first startup job, I was at Founder Drinks for our accelerator program, and I was speaking to quite a seasoned founder, serial entrepreneur sort of a guy, and he said, oh, you know, how long have you been in the ecosystem for? And I looked at my watch, I said, oh, like 6 days. And he gave me a really sage piece of advice. And I think he said something along the lines of, you know, don't pretend to know things that you don't know, and always stay humble, essentially. And I think that's absolutely true. You know, no matter how successful you are, how many businesses you have, how much money you raise, I think it's important to don't fake the things you don't know. It's okay not to know things. And if you're new to the ecosystem, it's okay not to know things. You don't always have to, you know, pardon my French, but like have your shit together. It's okay to sometimes be messy and scrappy, because that's part of the startup life. And I think if you're always, like we've alluded to earlier, always learning, always growing, and have that the curiosity of a child, and leave your ego at the door, I think that will serve you really well, especially in an ecosystem like the Australian one, which is quite small. Everyone knows everyone. And so, you know, if you can form those good relationships with people and build trust with people, you know, I think that's how you can get ahead.
Anyone else like to jump in?
If I had one piece, would be like sometimes in the early days, I feel guilty for taking time off. It's silly when you think about it, when you vocalize it. But if you don't, and if you don't actually take care of yourself, and I'm not talking like taking 6 weeks off, but if you don't take scheduled time off for yourself, you're going to burn out very quickly, and that's going to do a lot more damage than taking an afternoon off or a day off or a couple of days off every couple of weeks. So really be mindful of that, because you know we get this quite. In the last decade, we've been painted this picture of this like toxic, like, you know, just keep hustling, grind through it, you can do it kind of thing. But you got to really take time for yourself, because if you're not resting, well, you're not as strong as you could be. So, you know, you're not making the movements you should.
Any thoughts to add, Ivan, Aisha?
Aisha, you can go on with.
Thank you, Ivan. I think it was Steve Blank when I mentioned to him that I wanted to do a social impact, you know, type of startup. And I think it was at a time when there was so much focus on that, you know, unicorn type of startup where it was going to generate, you know, billions of dollars, and it was going to revolutionize and disrupt the world and whatnot. I was quite a lot more humble than that. And he's, you know, and I got some encouragement from him, and he said, you know, just do it. And that was a way, you know, to look at the space with a different lens, which brings in this whole thing that I've, you know, been constantly thinking about, is the ethical considerations of what we're doing. You know, is it making the world a better place, or are we just contributing to the pollution, to the exploitation, you know, to this, you know, inequity in income, the income gap. So I think there's still a space for startups and the thinking around that, for it to have a social impact. And one of the things that's really encouraging, because I work with high school students, is that they're actually thinking in those lines, which is really, really great. So I think we need to be mindful of that as we work in the startup spaces, and we encourage that it's, you know, that profit, but not profit at any expense. That's what I would say.
Few tips from myself. I sometimes ask myself, what would I do differently in the past? Because my journey, I've been doing business close to 20 years, and the first 6-7 years was just hell. I went through bankruptcy, went through so many troubles, all of people money. And I ask him now, what would I do differently? I think number one will be, I would find a mentor. I could only wish back then, 20 years ago, there wasn't people like you guys. There wasn't StartSpace, right? There was an accelerator. So it was challenging. I feel so lonely. I felt lonely back then, and being an international student and migrant. And I thought, this is a jungle, a completely jungle for me. And I knew nothing about business, right? So number one, I think it's so important for you to find a mentor, not just anyhow mentor, and mentor that is fit to what you're about to do. And number two, a mentor that you can trust. And number two, it's so important for you to listen, because what's the point of having a mentor if you don't want to listen? I mean, back to Cristabel earlier said, you got to be humble, you got to be teachable. Forget about getting a mentor if you're just gonna go with yourself. You're gonna stuck with yourself, right? So number two is listen. Number three, I think it's very important. Great ideas is amazing, right? But executions is what's give you the legacy. I mean, it's so important. I'm big with executions because I was a doer myself. We are in the operations with Navanti Holdings. Before we even launch all this startup grooming ecosystems, we were building businesses ourselves, and we found that executions is a lot. That's where I actually bleed. That's where you actually sweat. And there are a lot of checklists in the executions from the operations, the things that you need to know, how to set KPIs. And if you don't know this thing, as you said, don't pretend that you don't know. You got to find someone who knows. Here in the 11 space, that's one of the things that we actually train as being part of the ecosystem. We'll train you about the operations, the KPI, how to build a business model, MVP, and all that things, because we know it's so important to plan before you even go to the war. I think that's from me.
Thanks, Ivan. And moving now into Q&A. Quick thought, Alex?
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, it's quite intimidating. Sorry, just building off what Aisha kind of started with was, you know, we talk about unicorns a lot. It's quite intimidating for someone who hasn't been in the startup space to be like, oh, well, I have to build a unicorn. It has to be $1 billion. And it's really important to realize, like, you don't have to conquer the world to win. Like Delivr, for instance, is a very, very small platform compared to everyone else. We have a $0 ad budget compared to the other guys in the sphere. But if we're on a race to profitability, we win 100 times out of 100, right? And we're not going to be worth $1 billion. But what it's allowed me to do is go straight out of uni and kind of exit the rat race, right? It gives me an ability to sit here in my office and ponder things and think my next step and make my next 10 steps. So it's really important not to like get caught up with all the stresses of trying to make the next $1 billion thing. You can build one thing and that's very okay, and then use it as a platform to build the next couple things or whatever you want to do. It's a weird world. You can do whatever.
I think that's a really good segue into some of our audience Q&As, and Ivan touched about, you know, some failures in the past. And would the panel be open to talk about any startups they took part in that failed to take off and how they moved on from that? So would anyone like to share some more stories, perhaps?
How do the questions come out?
Oh,
where do we see the questions?
Yeah.
Oh, you're reading out the question. Okay. All right.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay. So you want some failure story?
If you're willing to share.
It's fine. When I started my business on a F&B, food and beverages. So I own a really tiny cafes, really tiny cafes in Berg Street, corner of Berg Street in Swanston. And I bought the cafe from someone else, and being so green about it. And back then I got funded from my friend and my family too, you know, small sport, and it was just not expensive anyway. But it was a huge curve of learning because my due diligence was pretty weak. I didn't know how to do a proper due diligence. So I bought a business, existing business. Apparently there's so many things that they have placed in trap. The shopping centers that it was a tiny shopping centers below an office, and apparently I couldn't extend my rent after 2 years. That's it. They've been hiding all the information that they're gonna actually demolish the whole shopping centers and not being able to extend my lease. So that means the thing, my business has to stop right then, right there, and that's gone to the dust. And then I cut the story short, I hustled to have another restaurant. It's a Korean barbecue kind of thing. Back then it wasn't that popular. Now it's everywhere, in every corner, right? But back then I was for the only few. And then I grew my restaurant into the third one. But then this is the big mistake. So I grew too fast. I tried to do a new concept. My restaurant was doing okay, but then I was trying to create a franchise concept. Then I went to Melbourne Central, deal with shopping malls, never dealt with them. I didn't have any mentor how to deal with shopping and how to negotiate with them. So I paid crazy amount of money for a tiny food court stalls, 140,000 rent per year. Can you imagine? In a food court, selling bento box $7 back then. How many bento box I have to sell, right? And the thing is that being young and aggressive, not knowing about expansions, I borrow money from other people. I didn't grow organically enough because I was so ambitious and I want to grow quickly. And I know my concept is going to be good. You know, when being a founder, you think that your concept is going to be right, but it's not. Then I went there, create a new concept. Market wasn't ready for fast food Korean. I failed. I was bleeding 10, 15,000 a month. Within a year, I think I was, pretty much going down the drain. And then I lost. Cut the story short, there was a lot of drama back then. I have to beg with the shopping centers because one time they put a hoarding around it. Can you believe it? In the Melbourne Center, one day in the morning, I came with my staff, all them, we were going to open the shop, but they put timber hoarding all around it because I couldn't pay for rent for 4 months. They locked me out. And I literally begged. I lost my ego. We said about ego, forget about ego, guys. Being entrepreneur, I was just doing this, please open, give me just 2 more weeks. And I said, no. And then that's the very first time I understand about the real word about business. She said like this, forget it, Ivan. You have to understand that this is business. And then I was crying straight away. And I had to borrow more money from my friend just to open the shop. And cut the story short, I lost that shop. I went to bankruptcy. And the next 2 years, I was just paying my money off to the people that I owe. 2 years, I was working for someone else just to pay off my debt. I hope that's enough story.
Thank you for sharing. That sounds so challenging. Yeah, appreciate your candor.
Full of tears, Krista. Every night I was just crying on myself. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Ivan. We've also got a question for Aisha. What's your advice for a B2B startup? I guess getting that first customer. Over to you.
B2B, a lot more challenging, I would say. Not as well. Look, I think they have different challenges. What I would say with B2B is develop your network. Try to get into the right decision makers, and I think that's so that if you're just starting out on the idea and you have you don't have basically a product or service, you haven't developed anything, the quicker you can understand. The most important thing about B2B is, first of all, I think if I talk strategically, is your domain. You need to be technically competent in that space. And if you're not, partner up with someone who knows the domain quite well, so that the solution or the problem that you're working on is actually one that's real in that space. And so I think that's really, really key. And secondly, I would say networking and finding, the people that are in that space. And I think with LinkedIn these days, you can have a lot of access to people that traditionally you probably wouldn't. And I think that's a really great way to go. And most people, I find, if you're technically competent enough, it's a great conversation starter to at least get that conversation going. Insofar as landing your first customer, I think you need to do quite a bit of work to understand the problem so that it actually solves something real. and it's, you know, it's all the particulars are detailed. It's a long journey. It's not going to be something that's going to be as quick as if you're dealing with a retail customer, but the earlier that you can onboard these decision makers, and maybe they're not C-level, maybe they're working at different levels, but the more that you can co-design with them, you can use them as your co-designers, and as they become, you know, more aware of your solution that you're offering, there's more awareness around that potentially could lead to something like a customer. That's what I would say.
There's a few questions coming around about community and co-founders, and drawing on what you were just mentioning, Aisha, about the tech side of things. And obviously Alex has mentioned he wasn't a tech co-founder. So just to the panel, how do you go about building a new community, building an existing community, and then through those avenues, how do you start finding people that you'd like to work with, especially if you're not a tech co-founder? Where do you find these mythical tech co-founders that can help bring your ideas into fruition?
Do I start?
You go ahead, Alex.
Okay. I think one of the quickest lessons that I could teach you ever, if you're trying to build anything, especially if it's online based, and we're talking like any sort of scalable platform of any kind, for the most part, you can get a lot done using software as a service, which is just SaaS, or using, if you want to get more technical, maybe plugins on WordPress. But any idea you have, especially when we're trying to prove concept first, instead of spending a lot of money building something out and just doing a year of umming and ahhing and be like, oh, I just don't have the money for 200 grand to build this, that. If you Google whatever you're looking for, followed by SaaS, chances are there's enterprise software that has already been built, and they'll charge you $100 to $200 a month, and then you could get going. You could be doing revenue, you could be making money. And then, you know, once you start proving concept, and once you outgrow that, because you may at some point, well then, like Ivan was saying, once you have a track record, you then take that to your possible investors, and you know, you might actually get a better deal. Because if you go in you're just going to waste so much time, and it's quite intimidating. Just search. If you have OneNote, write it down. Google X idea followed by SaaS, and then see how you go, because it'll save you a lot. Coming back onto one of the questions that Ivan answered before, one of my biggest failures, my biggest regret, is I have one rule, and it's never build your own software. Primarily because, again, I'm in the whole bootstrapping of things, and I like doing that, but it's always quite expensive. And end of 2019, I broke my own one. I have one rule and I broke it. And I had this great idea that I was going to build a premium content subscription thing like OnlyFans, but for fitness influencers, and you could follow them, and instead of paying $60 an hour, you could just subscribe. You'll find out what they're eating and working out every day and whatever. It could have been a cool thing. I spent 60 grand, and the minute it was delivered, it was outdated. The minute that I was out of money, I had it delivered, and the minute it was delivered, everybody else had better software, and they just brought out better things. And like, well, damn. And then, depressingly more, last week I had another meeting with another project we're doing, and I found there's a plugin now on for WordPress. It could have been like, it only came out 4 months ago, but it pretty much does everything I want in a way better way for $50. So don't get too don't get too locked down in the idea that I'm non-tech, I don't know what to do, because for the most part, it's going to be really easy and really affordable, and you could always customize things to make it fit. You know, like tomorrow, like you could have an Airbnb competitor if you did it properly in like a month. You know, I mean, they won't consider you competition because you're small, but you can have the right software to do it. It's not impossible these days, especially in 2021. Great,
thanks for the thoughts, Alex. I think we're nearly at time, but throw out to the audience that, like, as each of our esteemed panelists have these amazing communities that they're also involved with, especially Aisha and Krista and Ivan. Just wanted to thank our panel just for their time, and see you at the rest of the festival. Thank you very much.